Get some! Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. Of course, we got the whole 2-hour show today, then the bonus episode, and then at 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern, Donald Trump's going to announce. I will be covering it live for you guys right here. So, interesting day ahead. Casper, let's get started.
Well, we begin with some international news, and as I explained the preliminary details, don't freak out because there's a lot we don't know yet, but this could potentially be a huge deal. According to senior US military officials, Russian missiles have landed inside Poland and 2 individuals have reportedly died as a result. Now, CNN reports that the 2 individuals who were killed were farmers in a rural part of Poland. And since Poland is a NATO member, there is some possibility that pending an investigation, allied nations could invoke what's referred to as Article 5. I'll give you details on what that means in just a moment, but a lot is unknown about this, including lack of confirmation that these were in fact Russian missiles. Russia has denied that it's their missiles. In fact, they claim that blaming Russia for this attack is a provocation. Although, I mean, who else would do this? It's certainly not Ukraine, right? And so the real question at this point is whether or not this was an accident by Russia or if it was an intentional attack in Poland. Now, here's what we know for sure so far. Russia is in fact currently bombarding Ukraine with a massive salvo of missile strikes. Polish media were first to report on a huge blast by the Ukrainian border. Let me give you the details on that. Polish media showed an image of a deep impact and upturned farm vehicle at the site near the town of Privozodo, around 4 miles west of the Ukrainian border. A Polish official told CNN that nothing was confirmed yet and the investigation into the incident was continuing. What I'm happy to see, especially from the United States, and there has already been a State Department briefing on this, is that they're very careful and calculated, measured in the way that they're responding to this. They make it clear that a lot has not been confirmed yet, and they need to know what the intentions were here, whether it was an accident or if this was an intentional attack in Poland or on Poland. The Associated Press later cited 2 anonymous US military officials who said that the blast was caused by a Russian missile or missiles. However, other US officials have been more hesitant to assign responsibility. When asked about the reported strikes, US officials were cautious. Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Patrick Ryder told reporters that the Defense Department could not immediately corroborate the information coming out of Poland. So I'm sure this story is going to develop even further. Cenk, I do have more details, but what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, first thing is bring it down, bring it all the way down. So you know that we've been very critical of Russia here and said that they need to be matched in their aggression, not going beyond that, but that we need to protect Ukraine. Otherwise, they're going to expand into more territories, create more hostility, and create bigger wars. And that's why we want to make sure the Russians were checked. Now, having said that, rushing into an Article 5 war against Russia is nuts. So it's just one missile. Now, if it turns out it's an accident or mistake, as Anna's been saying, that's a completely different scenario than if it was intended. And you'll know if it was intended. How will you know? Based on evidence of this missile? No, not likely. No, you'll know if there's a second missile and a fourth missile and an eighth missile, right? So there is a number. I don't know what the number is. Third or fourth missile, when it becomes clear that it is intended, then we're in a completely different ball game, and that ball game is very dangerous and very problematic and has no easy answers, okay? But right now we're not in that ball game. We're just in a stray missile. Let's all bring it down and try to resolve it as calmly and diplomatically as we can.
Yeah, the worst thing that could happen is if this turns into a game of chicken, right? And I like the thing with Putin, and again, I want to be clear, nothing has been confirmed yet. I'm just saying worst case scenario, this is what would happen. Putin is unpredictable and he is not a rational actor. And he does incredibly erratic things that causes backlash toward him by his own people, that's for sure. And so right now, considering the fact that Russia is losing this war, Russian troops have lost Kherson, and every time Putin begins to lose or the troops begin retreating, he starts doing even more irrational things, right?
Yeah, except I'm going to put a huge asterisk on that because it depends on your point of view on irrational. If your point of view is the rest of the planet and not getting into a nuclear war, yes, it's deeply irrational. But there is an actual reason why he's doing it, because his control internally within Russia is starting to get questioned and starting to fray. So now he's got Russian TV pundits all over the air questioning how they lost the last city that Anna referred to, right? So with those internal enemies closing in, the best way to solidify them is unfortunately a bigger conflict which forces everyone in Russia to circle the wagons. So it's a trick as old as time and a very dangerous one. So if Putin only cares about his own well-being and he feels endangered by domestic politics because of his failure in this war, he could look to ironically expand it rather than contract it in order to fend off his internal opponents. And that is where we get into significant danger for all of us.
Now, from what I'm seeing in terms of the response from Polish officials is a very careful response to this, right? And they're calling for more investigations, which obviously should happen. Polish media reported that the explosions may have been caused by the remains of a Russian missile intercepted by Ukrainian armed forces, a much different calculus for NATO than intentional Russian strikes. And yeah, I think intention absolutely does matter. If it was an accident, the idea of invoking Article 5 would be insane. And what is Article 5? Well, a deliberate attack on a NATO member could, in theory, lead to the invocation of the alliance's Article 5, which states that an attack on one member of the military alliance is considered an attack against all. But the NATO treaty is highly unlikely to be triggered by an accidental attack. So that's why this investigation is so important to kind of figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, nearby countries in Eastern Europe like Estonia are all tweeting about we defend every inch of NATO. Now the reason they're saying that is not because they care deeply about their Polish allies, and I'm sure they do. But the main reason they're saying it is, remember, don't abandon us. Russia's most likely to take Estonia next if you allow them to continue to encroach upon Eastern European territories that are not their own. So that's why Poland would be a gigantic test if that's what Putin intends. One last thing. Look, the longer you wait and the longer you do diplomacy, the longer internal opponents of Putin have to take care of things within Russia, right? So you might catch a lucky break there. So do not start any conflict that you can't roll back and bide your time. There does come a time, but that means you've already taken a disastrous turn. So try to stay away from that disastrous turn for as long as humanly possible. That would be my advice for what it's worth to the US and allies.
Well, we'll stay on the story and update you guys as we learn more. For now, though, let's go back to some domestic politics with a pretty big update that broke after the show yesterday. Well, it's official. Kari Lake has lost her bid for governor in the state of Arizona, and the new governor will be Democrat Katie Hobbs, who's the current Secretary of State. Now, Lake is handling it real well, tweeting this: Arizonans know BS when they see it. They sure do.
That's why you lost.
They sure do.
Anna, can I do it?
Yeah.
Everybody wants it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Yeah. Down goes Kari Lake. Down goes Kari Lake. Down goes Kari Lake. And the reason why that's so important is not just because of Kari Lake, but because of what she represents. She represents the crazies, the election deniers, the irrational, the Trump acolytes, and they have now almost all been defeated. She was the last one standing, and she stands no more. We'll give you more details.
Yes, I have a lot more details, but before we get to them, there's something that's been on my mind and I have to get it out. You guys know me. If I'm thinking about something, I have to share it with you. I think about the panic that I personally felt in the months before the 2020 presidential election with Louis DeJoy, a Trump lackey in charge of the post office during an election cycle where an increasing number of Americans were expecting to vote by mail because of this ongoing pandemic, right? And it worked out. It ended up being totally fine. Louis DeJoy is still in charge of the post office, which blows my mind, but that's just the fact of the matter. Then I think about all of the panic we all felt in regard to these Trump candidates, these Trump election deniers. And it turns out that the American people are far more rational than honestly I gave them credit for. And so maybe things just work out.
Yeah, no, okay.
I don't know.
We've got a hilarious role reversal here.
No, I know, but like the reason why I say that is because we also have to acknowledge that we exist in a media bubble where panic sells. And sometimes I'm worried that we buy into that panic too much.
Nope, not at all.
Okay.
We're the most rational actors, the fairest show in America. And no, and
we're humans who make human mistakes.
Yeah, no, never made one.
Okay.
No, listen, guys. Of course, when we make mistakes, we own up to it, etc. And in fact, I give the Democrats a lot of credit. But apparently, the focus on democracy and abortion largely worked. The pivot to Social Security at the end worked. Giving student debt relief definitely worked. That was showed in the exit polling, and it drove out a lot of younger voters, etc. So credit where credit is due. But here, I'm being the one that's a little skeptical. Why? Kari Lake barely lost.
Yeah, it's true.
She lost by like 3 votes, I'm exaggerating, but not by much, after a week of counting. So it's not like we crushed them. We barely won in Arizona with Kari Lake being a total and utter clown, a buffoon of epic proportions. And you beat her by like 7 votes, and we're all going crazy as if the Democrats are kings of the world. They're not. They're not. So they're about to make a giant mistake, which happens all the time after a big victory. So yes, this victory was. Like they lost the House, let's also keep that in mind. And at this point, they're either gonna have a 50-50 Senate or they're gonna pick up 1 seat. That's what all this giant celebration is over. The reality is the celebration is over the Trump insanity losing, right? Now, don't get it twisted. It doesn't mean the Democrats are on the perfect track.
No, they're not.
No, look, the Democrats are on such a bad track that they barely beat lunatics.
No, but I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. All of the criticisms you have for the Democratic Party, I share. I agree with those criticisms, and I think that it would be a huge mistake for Democrats to think to learn all the wrong lessons from this midterm election cycle.
Which they definitely will.
Which absolutely, right? So the incredibly risky tactic of propping up the Trump lackeys and the extreme right, they're gonna continue doing that, and I think that they're playing with fire, and they shouldn't do that. But nonetheless, putting that aside, just in regard to the American electorate, where they're at when it comes to these lunatic Trump candidates, no, we should have more faith in them because they did turn these candidates down. That's what I'm referring to, right?
Yeah,
I think we just kind of got sucked into this news cycle of constantly hearing about, the percentage of Trump voters in the Republican electorate who do back the lunatics, right? But they're not the majority of the Republican Party.
No, they're definitely the majority. No. Again, don't get it twisted. The Trump lunatics are definitely the majority of the Republican Party. And I wish it weren't the case. But I'm thrilled that there is a minority within the Republican Party that thinks it's a bridge too far. Remember, look, the best example is Georgia, where the Trump crazy Herschel Walker gets 8.5% less than Brian Kemp, who's a very right-wing Republican, but not insane, right? So we don't like Kemp. Kemp's terrible in 1,000 ways, but he doesn't think that if you lose an election, that means you actually won, right? So That's an 8.5 point difference, but that's an 8.5 point difference for the whole state of Georgia, not within the Republican Party. So within the Republican Party, that percentage is even smaller. So yes, it's true that we only need a tiny percentage of Republicans to flip or to not vote to get to sanity in the country, for the whole country, right? But that's still a tiny percentage. So it's not like, oh my God, the Republicans are awesome. No, they're generally speaking still awful. And an overwhelming majority of them still believe in Trump and that the election was stolen, and all those polls are not at all wrong, right? But again, don't get me wrong, the fact that that 8.5% exists and that it swings elections is monumentally important, and that's why we're all breathing a sigh of relief here as Kari Lake loses, as so many of these other crazy people lost. And remember, Herschel Walker hasn't even lost. Herschel Walker's totally nuts. And he has not lost yet in Georgia. They're going to go to a runoff. But yes, especially given the Republican establishment reaction, and most importantly, forget their establishment, the Republican media reaction, the fact that they're saying, okay, we lost, and we're, no matter if it's 7.5, 8.5, or 9.5, we're not going to win these elections if we run lunatics because we're losing the middle too much. Great, that's great news. But it comes with another asterisk. That means the Republicans are going to pivot, likely. But when they do, the Democrats will likely stay where they are because that's what they always do.
Yes.
Then the Republicans will have a huge advantage because it's not like Brian Kemp and Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott lost. They all won, and they all won easily.
Yes. Yeah, and all right, fine, Cenk, fine. All right, I won't be positive ever.
Sorry. I mean, we had a positive Anna for a minute, and I ruined it.
No, but like, also, I'm making the mistake of failing to juxtapose the Republican primaries to the actual general elections, right? And that served as a big challenge for the Trump candidates because while they handily won primary races up against other quote unquote normal Republican candidates, they had difficulty in the general. So really what makes the difference are those moderate voters or independent voters. And so your point about the Republican electorate stands, and I will accept it.
Oh,
okay?
Is she not merciful? Fairest show in America, we just told you.
And there is a disconnect between what makes up the Republican establishment, meaning the political leaders and the politicians, and then the actual Republican electorate. I think that disconnect exists, and we'll see how that plays out in coming elections. But I do want to go to a Liz Cheney angle to this whole Kari Lake update, because while I certainly have no love for Liz Cheney, she engaged in some choice trolling that I am in favor of. So first I got to give you some context. In late October, Liz Cheney put out a pretty vicious political ad against Kari Lake, and we have that snippet for you right now. Let's take a look.
I don't know that I have ever voted for a Democrat, but if I lived in Arizona, I absolutely would. You have a candidate for governor, Kari Lake. You have a candidate for Secretary of State, Mark Finchem, both of whom have said that they will only honor the results of an election if they agree with it. And if you care about the survival of our republic, we cannot give people power who will not honor elections. We must have elected officials who honor that responsibility.
So Kari Lake saw that vicious political ad targeted toward her and Finchem, and she didn't like it, but she put out a very sarcastic thank you on Twitter, along with a statement directed at Liz Cheney. Now, here's the tweet in question. She tweeted this out, I believe, on October 28th. And in the statement, she writes, "Your recent television ad urging Arizonans not to vote for me is doing just the opposite. Our campaign donations are skyrocketing and our website nearly crashed from traffic as people rush to learn more about my plan to put Arizona first and join our historic political movement." I'm sure that's exactly what happened, Kari. Well, Liz Cheney never responded to that until Kari Lake's defeat was announced. And she quote tweeted it with, "You're welcome, Kari Lake." And I just enjoyed that.
Yeah, she's like, "Oh, thank you for helping my campaign." And she's like, "You're welcome." So, look, did Liz Cheney make the difference? I don't know, maybe. Remember, it's that elusive middle that apparently exists, as we found out in these midterm elections, that are deciding these very, very close elections. So every little bit helped. And so I'm glad that Liz Cheney came in and peeled off a couple of Republican voters. I'm sure it did help Kari Lake's fundraising, because that's when you go, oh my God, they're attacking me, and the Republicans now hate Liz Cheney, et cetera. So it was a little bit of both. And I certainly wouldn't give most of the credit to Liz Cheney, but she did her part, and God bless on that part. It doesn't mean any of her policies are correct, but the fact that a couple of Republicans were brave enough to turn on Trump and to back reality and democracy before it was cool to do that, is important, and you should give people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger a lot of credit for, and Justin Amash, who everybody's forgotten about because it was a cycle ago.
Give them credit for doing the bare minimum.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Which makes them 200 times better than all of these phonies that you're seeing on TV today going, oh, we got to turn away from Trump. They weren't saying that just a week ago. They were all up Trump's ass a week ago. So I know it's damning with faint praise and it's a low bar, but they cleared it and none of the other Republicans did.
That's correct. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, there is a growing rebellion against Kevin McCarthy in the House. We'll give you the updates on who's against him within the GOP. And we'll give you updates on how he did in the vote for the next House Speaker. Come right back.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. We got more news.
We sure do. Let's start with this.
I have spoken with many Republicans in Congress and many who will join our ranks soon. None are actually inspired by Kevin McCarthy, though many feel financially beholden to him because he is the LeBron James of special interest fundraising. In this last cycle, Kevin McCarthy, his team, they raised $500 million in campaign money. That buys a lot of friends, or at a minimum, rents them.
Republican Matt Gaetz happens to be one of the GOP lawmakers who is against the notion that Kevin McCarthy should serve as the next House Speaker. In fact, there is an ongoing rebellion against McCarthy, but despite that fact, McCarthy did easily win a vote today that would make him the nominee for Speaker of the House. And of course, this is due to the fact that Republicans have taken back control of the House of Representatives. McCarthy won easily, 188-31 in the internal conference meeting. But in the eyes of Representative Andy Biggs and his supporters, the goal was merely to demonstrate that McCarthy lacks the support to seize the gavel when the full House meets to choose the Speaker early next year. Now, I'll decode that and tell you what that all means in just a moment. But first, why don't we go back to Matt Gaetz and hear a little more from him in regard to why he's not supporting McCarthy.
I'm making my announcement, which is that I'm not voting for Kevin McCarthy. I'm not voting for him tomorrow. I'm not voting for him on the floor. And I am certain that there is a critical mass of people who hold my precise view.
And one of those people who holds that precise view is Representative Biggs, who also wanted to run for Speaker of the House. So let's go to his statement. He was interviewed recently on Newsmax, and he explains why he wants to do this.
I'm going to be nominated tomorrow to the position of Speaker of the House. We'll see if we can get the job done and the votes. It's going to be tough. I mean, Kevin has raised a lot of money and done a lot of things, but this is not just about Kevin. I think it's about institutional direction and trajectory, and that's where we're going to see if we have enough people who agree that we need to change the trajectory of this place and open it up so where people can actually represent their constituency in a more open and transparent manner.
So let's just make this clear. It sounds like you just announced.
Yeah, I guess I did kind of.
Now, no one thinks that Representative Biggs is going to be the next Speaker of the House, but this vote was done in an effort to show McCarthy that they've got some leverage, meaning the Republicans who are against him, most of whom are in the House Freedom Caucus. These are the most extreme right-wingers in the House. They want to change some of the procedural rules within the House of Representatives, and they're using this as leverage against McCarthy. Now, it is unclear how many Republicans would in fact vote against McCarthy on the House floor on January 3rd. Conservatives say McCarthy does not have the 218 votes necessary to be elected Speaker of the House, but McCarthy's allies project confidence that he will in fact be Speaker. So Cenk, what's going on here?
Yeah, so first off, we're gonna get to in a second an amazing scenario where Liz Cheney could be Speaker of the House or Henry Cuellar. Now these are real scenarios, they're not totally fictional. They're not super likely, but they're definitely not impossible. So I'll explain that in a second. But let me deal with the folks that you just saw. Andy Biggs looks like a cadaver, let's say it and move on.
He does.
Okay, it looks like they revived him, they put him in one of those mortician suits and somehow got him to speak. Okay, now to the substance of what he said. Both he and Matt Gaetz did make one very good point that's totally true, which is that the reason Kevin McCarthy is the leader is because he raises the most money. And so all of Washington runs on corruption. Mitch McConnell raises the most amount of money in the Senate, McCarthy does in the House. But on the Democratic side, guess who raises the most? Schumer does in the Senate, Pelosi does in the House. Why? Are they the leaders? Because they raise the most money. And the mainstream media will tell you that means they're the best, especially when it comes to Democrats. For Republicans, there are mixed reactions, right? Here's the reality. No, it means they're the worst. They are the most corrupt. They have made the most promises to corporate donors and other incredibly wealthy individuals to do exactly as they are commanded and not to look out for their voters. That's super obvious to everybody in America except mainstream media reporters. But I like that we've got Republicans actually saying it on air. That's terrific. Part of the reason that Matt Gaetz says it is because he takes no PAC money at all. He was on our show, he talked about it, but I knew that beforehand. And in fact, I was trying to give him credit for that when we were talking about it as I moved on to what I'm going to give him discredit for, which I always do, which is, but Matt, then what's the point? Because you still have the same exact corporate agenda as McCarthy does.
1000%.
So all of this is about nothing. So I read trying to figure out what are they mad at McCarthy about? Because I get it, they're super mad and they're never gonna vote for him. But on the Democratic side, there's this very significant and real policy divide. Progressives don't like that the establishment is in favor of corporations and let them run amok. They do everything the donors want. Now progressives are very quiet and meek about that. They barely ever say it. They kind of mumble it under their breath a couple times on TV, but that is a substantive difference. The progressives want Medicare for all, the corporate Democrats do not, right? And we can go down the list of 12 policies like that. For Republicans, they're like, oh, I'm more extreme than you, but on what?
No,
on what?
It's amazing.
And so the only thing I could find was Matt Gaetz thinks that McCarthy would impinge too much on the sovereignty of Florida. No, get out of here. That's not your actual complaint. He says, oh, he wants to hire too many cops, but Florida has enough cops. That's not your complaint, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it's in reality a thing between the Trump quarters and the non-Trump people, but Marjorie Taylor Greene weirdly is on McCarthy's side.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
Yeah, you can't make heads or tails out of it because remember the most important takeaway is Republicans don't care about policy at all. All they care about, their politicians care about protecting the status quo so that we can live under oppressive corporate rule. That's their bosses. They love that we live under that corporate rule. And Republican voters, on the other hand, totally different priority, care about owning the libs. And they don't care about anything else, right? So Gaetz goes, oh, own the libs more. But I agree with you on 99% of policies. So it's a fake fight.
It is a fake fight. Also, there's some ego involved because one of the reasons why House Freedom Caucus member Representative Bob Good is upset at Kevin McCarthy is because Kevin McCarthy didn't call him to congratulate him on winning re-election.
Oh, come on, man. I mean, this is like when Jim Clyburn said, oh, Killer Mike said something slightly mean about me in a tangential way in a town hall and Nina Turner didn't disagree. That's why I got all my corporate friends to spend millions of dollars against Nina Turner because my feelings were hurt. Well, if true, that is 10,000 times worse. Oh, I don't care about policy. I don't care about the voters. My feelings were slightly hurt by someone sitting next to her.
Right.
Right. So all the politicians do this. And the mainstream media doesn't tell you that it's an terrible, absurd thing to do. They validate it by going, oh, that's true. Joe Manchin's feelings were hurt when someone put out a statement he didn't like, and Clyburn and the Biggs and these other guys, all their feelings are the most important thing in the world. We don't give a goddamn about your feelings. Do your job, care about policy. Now finally gets to Liz Cheney and Henry Cuellar. Okay, so Liz Cheney, this is the scenario in which she becomes Speaker of the House. Since the Republicans are gonna, it looks like, have only a 3-vote advantage, if all the Democrats vote for Liz Cheney and they get 3 moderate Republicans to vote for her, boom, she's the Speaker of the House. Remember, the Speaker of the House does not have to be in the House of Representatives. She got voted out, but that's irrelevant. Some people are talking about how Donald Trump could be Speaker of the House. That's not impossible either, by the way. It's less likely, but not impossible.
Yeah, but I got to jump in on that. And if Democrats actually do vote for Liz Cheney to be Speaker of the House, that further solidifies one of the biggest issues I have with the Democrats as of late, which is they have become the new party of George W. Bush, right? The never Trump Republicans leave the Republican Party and essentially join forces with moderate Democrats who I already had an issue with, and
who are already Republicans.
Who are already Republicans in a lot of ways, right? And you'll notice a lot of the Bush era characteristics now being carried out by the mainstream Democratic Party, and it bothers me a lot. So I just wanted to make that point. Go ahead.
So I've made this point 100 times, but I used to be a liberal Republican back when such a thing existed many, many years ago when I grew up in New Jersey. The current Democratic leadership is more right-wing than I was when I was a Republican. The entire spectrum in Washington has moved insanely right-wing, right? And yet again, mainstream media also gigantically right-wing on economic issues. That's why they never told you, oh yeah, we've been lying to you the whole time. The guys who used to be considered right-wing are now considered left-wing. The guys who are right-wing are now barbarians, but we don't say that, we say 50-50. They moved the Overton window on us. So finally, Henry Cuellar. Now the Republicans are going to Cuellar, who's a conservative Democrat in Texas, beat a Justice Democrat in a very tight primary and then won the general election. And the Republicans are saying, listen, if you switch parties, we can grab a couple more Democrats, and then that way we don't need the Freedom Caucus and the extreme right wingers, and we can get either you or McCarthy, more likely McCarthy, to be Speaker of the House as long as you back our play. And Cuellar, being conservative, he's apparently turned them down, but of course he heard them out. And now if he had done that, wow, Nancy Pelosi defeated his opponent in the primary, so did Clyburn. They helped to defeat someone who actually believed in the Democratic agenda.
Progressive Jessica Cisneros.
That's right, and Cuellar has never agreed with the Democratic agenda. He's always been a right winger. He voted with Trump 70% of the time. So if he turned around and go, thank you, Nancy, I appreciate your help, you schmuck. Now I'm gonna help Kevin McCarthy become Speaker of the House. That would be perfectly fitting. And by the way, I don't think Pelosi would mind too much.
I 100% agree with that. I mean, Pelosi can't stop herself from repeating how much she desires strong Republicans in Congress.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, I don't think it would bother her all that much.
And by the way, the final play is for Jim Jordan. They're not really going for Andy Biggs. Jim Jordan's going, oh no, golly gee, I like Kevin McCarthy's money. I'm not opposing him. But the play is to cause enough of a ruckus that they're either going to get big concessions on getting steering committee representation for the extreme right wing, thereby pushing the Republican Party even further right, especially on social issues, or they're going to make a play to get Jim Jordan to be the Speaker of the House by rallying the right wing around him.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including some of the anxiety Republicans are feeling in regard to the possibility of Trump running for president again in 2024. That and more coming right up.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, K-Red Sugar and Mike Bester, you guys are amazing. They hit the join button below the video on YouTube. Food for Thought Trivia, giving away $150 $100 gift cards to our members, and so for good comments as well. So make sure you jump into membership. This is a great week to do it. tyt.com/join. By the way, those gift cards do not last forever. So meaning that we're gonna at some point run out of giving them to you guys. So join now, it's a perfect time. All right, Casper.
We now go to a weak man.
Given all that you witnessed in the Capitol on that day, this is a pretty straightforward question, a yes or a no. Do you believe that Donald Trump should ever be president again?
David, I think that's up to the American people. But I think we'll have better choices in the future.
Former Vice President Mike Pence is still too afraid to speak out too aggressively against former President Donald Trump, but it is clear that the former VP is not a fan of Trump's. In fact, he makes that clear in this next clip. Let's watch.
The people of this country actually get along pretty well once you get out of politics. And I think they want to see their national leaders start to reflect that same compassion and generosity of spirit. And I think so in the days ahead, I think there will be better choices.
Better choices than Donald Trump. Will you run for president in 2024?
Well, we're giving it consideration in our House. Prayerful consideration.
Do you believe you can beat Donald Trump?
Well, that would be for others to say. And it'd be for us to decide whether or not we'd want to test that.
So if you decide to run and he's up there, so be it.
Man, the unearned confidence of mediocre individuals like Mike Pence never ceases to amaze me. So he is definitely considering a run in 2024, which I honestly didn't believe until I watched that video.
Yeah, no.
Like, what do you have going for you, bro? Really, think about it.
So we have another story in the show today about how Republicans might realize, at least some of them belatedly, like, oh, we might live in our own bubble. And the reality is, as we've talked about 1,000 times on this show, everybody lives in their own bubble. And so we're not immune from it, and that's why we're always wondering and checking ourselves and double checking, saying, hey, is this true, or is it because we live in a certain echo chamber, right? And so in the case of Mike Pence, he lives in his own bubble where he was part of the reason why Donald Trump won in 2016. Now the reality is that's not true at all. No. He was totally irrelevant. In fact, he was picked to be irrelevant. If you remember, Donald Trump had a couple of strong, big personalities he could have chosen from, but he chose to pick the meek, useless Mike Pence so that he wouldn't outshine Trump, okay? So, but Pence lives in a world where he thinks, oh, I was pivotal, and that he's strong and he stood up to Trump. And he did, to be fair to him, on January 6th. He did stand up to him and it made a big difference. But outside of that, no, he's back to being the same meek guy who has no chance at all. I mean, listen to his answers. If you're gonna run and win for the presidency of the United States, unless you're backed up by the giant corporate machine, like a guy like Joe Biden is, right? And all the media has your back and all of the politicians have your back, et cetera. If you're not in that seat, then you gotta come super strong. And here's what's not super strong. Oh, I don't know, that's for others to decide. We're giving it prayerful thought, okay? No, if you're gonna run and win, you say, goddamn right I'm winning, and if Trump's in the race, then I'm gonna beat him. That's how you win. You don't do it with, oh, I don't know, maybe others can decide. Yeah, Mike, we know you don't do all the voting. Other people decide, but you're supposed to make a case for yourself, and this ain't it.
Yeah, and I can't help but notice how he wants to strike this conciliatory tone, this need to kind of bring the country together, be unified. And it's like, where were you at when the president, when you were vice president and the president of the United States was intentionally dividing the country, using divisive issues to further sow hatred among the electorate? I mean, where were you? Where were you? Because he was all on board for that. And if he wasn't, he was too afraid to say something.
Too afraid.
Right.
Again, give him credit, on January 6th, he did not go along with the fake elector plot that was an attempted coup on America. Yes, it's the lowest bar in history, literally, okay? But he did clear it. So you give him credit for that. But outside of that, he has been, his entire career is defined by missing in action.
Now, I do want to go to Fox News's political analyst, top political analyst, and that's Brit Hume, who has some commentary in regard to Donald Trump and his fading star. Let's watch.
While he maintains real influence within the Republican Party, no two ways about that, but it has begun to fade. It started fading really, I think, after his annex post-election in 2020. That a great many people who were with him, perhaps up until then, began to move away from him. And he never has really done anything to change that. He's continued to insist that the election was stolen from him, that he should be the real president, and so on, so forth. And if you look at these election results, candidates who followed that line, who agreed with him about that, did not fare particularly well. They didn't all lose, but a lot of them did lose, and a lot of them lost in races that they could have won. So I think that both in terms of opinion and in terms of influence, his star has faded.
So I'm really curious to see how this plays out, because while you see an increasing number of Republican politicians, certainly the Republican or conservative media kind of stack up against Donald Trump following the underperforming Republicans in the midterms, I don't know if that's necessarily how Republican voters are feeling, right?
We don't know that at all yet.
Yeah, and there hasn't really been much attention paid to that, right? So I see Democrats celebrating because they think we got this, right? Everyone's turning on Trump. We don't have to worry about him anymore. No, but all we're hearing from, or the only people we're hearing from, are power players, politicians, members of the media. They don't represent the electorate. There could be a huge disconnect between the media and Republican politicians and where the Republican voters are at in terms of Donald Trump.
100%. In fact, we already see it. Why? Because we're actually out in the field, unlike all these people, and we are actually honest, unlike all these people. So when Michael Schur went down to Florida for us and asked Republicans at a rally, Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, every single one of them said Donald Trump, okay, in Florida. So nobody's voted at all yet. So what you're hearing is not just the politicians, but the right-wing media, and that is critical. So Murdoch has 100% turned on Donald Trump. There's a story out today that, in fact, he told Trump, he called him and let him know that, I don't know if it was a call, but he clearly communicated to him, we're done with you, we're moving on, and if you run, we're gonna turn all of our guns against you. And to the point where if you win the GOP nomination, we might even back a Democrat.
What?
Yes. Yeah, no, that's a story out today. No, so now.
And by the way, Rupert Murdoch never liked Trump, right? But he wasn't willing to go to war first time around. I mean, that's an interesting threat, to say the least.
So are they going to actually support a Democrat? No way. Because you read more into that story, you see Murdoch saying, well, I mean, it couldn't be Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. So it would have to be somebody more right-wing than Joe Biden. I mean, who are they gonna run? Right, Henry Cuellar or something? Maybe. Like, no, and are the Democrats gonna agree to run Liz Cheney? I mean, we would all tackle them. Yeah, they might love that. And
100%.
Murdoch and Pelosi are a perfect match, right? So I know in Washington, they're like, oh, that's crazy, that's not true at all. Show me one economic policy where they actually disagree, right? Don't show me fake votes from Nancy Pelosi. Show me her actions trying to get a bill passed that Murdoch wouldn't agree with. You can't find it. Anyways, it's because it's part of corporate rule. But to me, the more interesting part of the Murdoch story, because we already knew that Wall Street Journal and New York Post had turned on Donald Trump. They were doing one op-ed and cover story after another against Trump. We already knew that they were backing DeSantis. It was an amusing part of the story is they say the Fox News hosts, on the other hand, will be harder to control. They're very independent thinking. I'm like, no, they're not. First of all, their entire news division takes their orders from Murdoch, period, and they will do whatever propaganda is ordered. Second of all, other than Tucker Carlson and Hannity only because he's really good friends with Trump, but even so, he's got a $40 million salary. When Murdoch says heal, they will heal. And Tucker might not do it because he has his own political ambitions, but that's a different story. No, the entire empire will turn on Trump. Murdoch does run it, which leads to the final point. Guys, look at this. Do you think Fox News is doing news? Do you think Wall Street Journal and New York Post are doing news? When Murdoch openly, brazenly is saying, we will back this candidate instead of that candidate, and we will twist all of the news to make it appear as if this guy is popular and this guy is unpopular. This guy is good and that guy is bad. He's telling you, I control the so-called news.
I mean,
it doesn't get any clearer than that.
He certainly has the ability to put his thumb on the scale, and we've seen that through how many election cycles at this point? So I think that threat is a legitimate one. I don't know how much of an impact it has on the Republican electorate, to be honest with you.
Well, so that it does, and so somebody came up with a drinking game, one of our members did, for every point I make after I say final point. Okay, yeah. And they're right about that. But since you brought that up, so that's who shapes the mind of the right wing. They didn't.
I know,
Trump didn't pop into their head out of nowhere. Right wing media backed him 1,000%.
Okay, sure, that's true. But remember how Republican voters turned on Fox News when Fox News wasn't leaning into the big lie enough.
Yeah, and so that's why for Wall Street Journal and New York Post, they don't care about MAGA. Their revenue is not at all affected by MAGA. But for Fox News, it is. It's directly related to them. So that's why it's more of an interesting balancing act. And Murdoch does not control it as much as he wants to, because if he takes a completely wrong turn, the ratings will dive and he'll start to lose revenue and he'll start to panic. That's why it's Game of Thrones. This is a real fight within the Republican Party, more so than any fight I've ever seen in my life in politics. Most of the fights in politics are fake. They both agree to the corporate agenda, and they're having a fake fight for window dressing in theater. This is a real fight between Trump and the Murdoch wing, and I have no idea who's going to win.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about this FTX story, which has been developing for some time now, but it's finally gotten to a point where I'm a little bit giddy about it, a little bit. So let's discuss. Crypto exchange platform FTX has collapsed. In the span of a week, the man behind FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, went from a power player in the crypto space to a villain who lost most of his fortune and then plunged his company into bankruptcy and is now the target of a Security and Exchange Commission and DOJ investigation. But Bankman-Fried isn't losing any sleep. In fact, he told the New York Times in a recent interview, quote, "You would have thought that I'd be getting no sleep right now. And instead, I'm getting some. It could be worse." Now, there is an ongoing investigation. I want to be clear about that. We don't know exactly whether the accusations that have been thrown in his direction are accurate or have merit. But it looks like he might have done some pretty shady things with money that was invested into FTX to buy crypto. Okay, so let me give you the details on how this all worked out. The empire built by Bankman-Fried collapsed last week after a run on deposits left his crypto exchange, FTX, with an $8 billion shortfall, forcing the firm to file for bankruptcy. He also stepped down as CEO. He is no longer the CEO of FTX. And there is some suspicion regarding whether Bankman-Fried used billions of dollars in customer funds to prop up a trading firm, a hedge fund that he had founded that also, by the way, served as a massive conflict of interest. So Alameda is the hedge fund that we're talking about here, had accumulated a large margin position on FTX, essentially meaning it had borrowed funds from the exchange, Bankman-Fried said. It was substantially larger than I had thought it was, he said. And in fact, the downside risk was very significant. He said the size of the position was in the billions of dollars, but declined to provide further details. So we got to back up a little bit to kind of break that down and understand what's going on here, okay? So keep in mind there are two companies at play. There's the crypto exchange platform known as FTX, and then there's The relationship between Alameda and FTX was the root of Bankman-Fried's downfall. He founded the trading firm in 2017 and rented offices in Berkeley, California, not far from where he had grown up as the son of Stanford law professors. Soon the company made millions of dollars exploiting inefficiencies in the Bitcoin market. Okay. Now in 2019, Bankman-Fried, so 2 years later, he relocated the company to Hong Kong for an obvious reason, a friendlier regulatory environment. He moved with a small band of traders, including Caroline Ellison, a former trader at the financial firm Jane Street, and went on to start FTX, a marketplace for crypto investors to buy, sell, and store digital assets. Now, at this point, what's happening is basically, Alameda is taking money from FTX, which, by the way, if they were both based here in the United States, that would be illegal. There are regulations against it. But right now, Bankman-Fried's living in the Bahamas. They had moved one of these companies to Hong Kong. And the reason why they did it is because they wanted to create a situation in which Alameda, the hedge fund, could literally take deposit money from FTX and do all this risky investment with it.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out so well for them.
Okay, so first hint that things are about to head in a unsavory direction is when they move offshore. So Hong Kong, Bahamas, etc. means I'm about to break the law and I don't want to be subject to US jurisdiction when I do. Secondly, they're gonna have to investigate and they're gonna have to prove their case. But if he really took money from FTX and then betted in Alameda, that would appear to be highly illegal. And so that's basically taking other people's money and gambling with it, by the way, taking massive risk, and then later saying, oh, I didn't know this risk that I took in the billions of dollars was risky, that risky, okay? So he can gamble with his own money, but he can't gamble with your money. And if he did that, he should spend approximately a couple 100 years in jail. So we'll see if they have the goods on proving that, and if they could actually catch him and bring him to justice. But right now, he seems to be laughing his ass off, going, ha, so what? I'm not even losing any sleep over it. I'm gonna get to what a terrible person he is in politics in a second.
Yeah, he is a terrible person. And so the New York Times reports that the exchange, meaning FTX, lent Alameda as much as $10 billion.
Look, you deal with these guys at your own risk. Yeah, I know there's a whole bunch of bros who are like, oh, Bitcoin, I got this, I figured it out.
Democracy.
FTX, Dogecoin, etc. No, man, the professionals have already gone in and they've already set up very efficient robberies. Every sucker that goes in there without any regulations, you know what regulations are? They're laws. It's a different word for a law. Without any laws to protect you, you should rush in and cross your fingers that the guy's not gonna move to the Bahamas and take all your money and bet it so that he makes the profit and you don't. So it is more complicated than that, but the bottom line is he ain't here. He's in the Bahamas and he's basically going, ha, if anybody was stupid enough to trust me, they deserve the fate that was coming. And you think the guys who haven't been caught aren't thinking the same exact thing as you're pouring your hard-earned money into this crap? Okay.
Yeah, but Cenk, it's great because crypto isn't regulated. So
yeah, that's working out great, guys.
Yeah.
You libertarians, you nailed it again.
So I want to get to the whole regulation part because he tried to buy politicians to keep crypto unregulated, and there's a point to that. Before I get to that though, I want to go to graphic 8 here. Because this excerpt from a New York Times piece today, I think perfectly explains what happened here. Alameda had taken out loans and used the money to make venture capital investments, among other expenditures. Around the time the crypto market crashed this spring, Ellison, remember that's the woman we referred to earlier, she's now managing this hedge fund. Ellison explained lenders moved to recall those loans. The person familiar with the meeting said, but the funds that Alameda had spent were no longer easily available, so the company used FTX customer funds to make the payments.
Disaster.
And by the way, I was watching a CNBC video on this today, and the analysts are like, well, why are they talking to the press? They need to stop talking to the press because they're making all these admissions here.
It's hilarious because the analysts are in the press.
I know.
And they're like, remember, you should only talk to us because we're the corrupt press. You shouldn't be talking to free press. Free press will actually print things that are true. Won't do propaganda for you. Are you nuts? That could get you in trouble. Our job is to protect you at CNBC and other parts of corporate douchebaggery press.
Now, final wrinkle to this story that's so fascinating. So this guy, Bankman-Fried, is obsessed with keeping crypto deregulated, right? And so he spent a lot of money during the midterm elections on buying politicians, namely Democratic politicians, okay? In fact, he was the second largest donor to Democrats during the midterm elections, and he was only second to George Soros.
Okay, and this is when most articles that I have read make it seem like, oh, they're losing a good guy Democratic donor. No, there was nothing good guy about him. So number one, he didn't go in there with good intent like, oh, we've got to protect democracy. No, he's against democracy. He's like, no, I'm purchasing you Democrats because the Republicans are already in our back pocket. There's no way they're gonna regulate us. They're corrupt by nature. But you guys, I have to actually do cash payments for. Nancy Pelosi, heel. Chuck Schumer, heel. I give you money and you do corruption. He was one of the worst guys out there. And what did he do? He spent most of it in primaries. It didn't even fight Republicans. It fought progressives who would actually regulate him to protect against exactly what just happened here. Instead, he gave to corrupt Democrats like Shontel Brown against Nina Turner, who's now on this network. So
either way, look, the chickens came home to roost. That's the whole reason why I brought it up, okay? Because he tried to buy politicians, but as he's buying politicians, he's smack talking the head of Binance, which is another crypto platform, right? And that ended up really hurting him because he needed this guy to buy FTX, to basically bail him out. So let me give you that context real quick. So in Washington, Bankman-Fried was pushing an ambitious regulatory agenda, meaning deregulation, while speaking critically of Changpeng Zhao, the chief executive of the rival exchange Binance, who eventually mobilized his extensive Twitter following to set off the run on FTX, right? So Changpeng Zhao hears about how, he's being criticized, insulted, whatever, by Bankman-Fried as he's lobbying in Washington for deregulation. Zhao is not happy about that. And so he had planned to buy FTX. A former investor in FTX, Zhao still owned a large amount of FTT, a cryptocurrency that FTX invented to facilitate trading on its platform. On November 6th, Zhao announced on Twitter that he was selling the FTT, spooking customers who rushed to withdraw their FTX deposits. And at that point, the company's failing, and he's like, maybe I'll buy FTX, which would be a bailout. But then he hears word that Bankman-Fried was insulting him and decided, maybe I won't, right? And then he also looked into the financials and noticed that there were all sorts of issues with the financials. He hasn't been too detailed about what he found, but I'm sure we'll find out through this FTC investigation.
Guys, all these guys pretend to be geniuses, and it's marketing hype. Don't fall for it. Because the whole point is, trust me, I'm so smart. If you give me your money, I'm going to double it. No, if you give me your money, I'm going to steal it is the far more accurate description here. And look at what he did. He messed with the largest owner of the FTTs, and he didn't think through, what if this guy pulls out? What happens to FTX, and then what happens to my hedge fund? Not thinking that through is incredibly stupid, and that's what Bankman-Fried is. He's a dumbass. By the way, he's a child.
He's 30.
Look at they think they're so smart. Drop the guy. You remember, you guys, this old school graphic? Drop the elbow on him. Love it, it's back, okay? So off he goes, FTX is totally collapsed. He doesn't have any more money to give to corrupt Democrats. Good riddance. By the way, American prosecutors, for God's sake, do your job. If he broke the law, punish him to the maximum degree. And there's a slight chance that'll happen in this case because some of the people he stole from are rich. So now justice might come get him.
All right, that does it for our first hour. When we come back for the second hour of the show, we've got an update on more United States companies using and abusing child labor.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.